Okay, we're going to look at a scenario, say within games development, where we want to take some high-quality 32-bit renders and produce tone-mapped versions for, say, promotional or marketing purposes. If we're looking to do this quickly and with minimum fuss, we can achieve all the adjustments we need purely within Photo's tone mapping persona. So to get started, I've imported my 32-bit OpenEXR render, and I want to select the RGB pixel layer and then go to the tone mapping persona. Okay, so one thing to bear in mind is, given the extreme dynamic range of these scenes, we might have to compromise and accept that compressing all of that extra range into our tone mapped result might not look too great visually. So depending on the scene, we might want to back off a bit on the overall tone compression. Now, local contrast. Local contrast works well on merged HDR photographs for that particular punchy look, but it's very easy to overdo it. And unless you're going for a particular look, like this, it's a good idea to settle on a small amount, or perhaps even none at all. Now, from here on out, it's a case of finding the adjustments that work best for you. But, for example, I might enable curves and pull the shadow detail down, so immediately that counteracts the flat, washed out look. Then I might choose to bring up the lighter areas of the scene, and scrubbing the highlight slider up just by a small amount is actually a very effective way to do this. It's worth noting that in the tone mapping persona, all of these controls are reasonably sensitive, so if I want to add a bit of saturation, even a small amount like 5 or 6% will make an appreciable difference. Finally then, we can tweak the overall contrast of the scene, and we can treat this almost like a master tonal adjustment because it can have such a dramatic impact. And once we're all done here, we can click Apply to commit the tone map. So if I just move across to the history panel and move back one step, we can see the initial image. And by tone mapping it, we've taken all of that extra precision, all of that unbounded range, and created an image that we can then share, again for marketing or promotional purposes. So let's just take this approach and try it on another render quickly. Once again, I'll select the RGB layer here, move into the tone mapping persona. Okay, so once again, a very similar approach. We'll take the tone compression down, add a tiny amount of local contrast. This time, we'll take the highlights down slightly, and we'll take a similar approach with curves as we did with the previous render. We'll bring the shadow tones down, push the midtones up. Perhaps with this one, these shadow tones want to be less dramatic. We will also boost the saturation, perhaps a bit further this time. And finally, we'll raise the midtones further using the brightness slider. Okay, so once again, we'll click Apply to commit the tone map. And as before, let's just compare before the tone map and after. So less dramatic a difference this time around, but we have brought out a lot of the foreground detail. Now then, when it comes to exporting, it's a very straightforward process. The export dialog actually takes care of everything for you. So let's say, for example, we want to export to a 100% quality JPEG. That will automatically convert to 8-bit and assign the relevant sRGB profile. However, if we want to take a manual approach and convert to 8-bit depth ourselves, just to make sure that it's going to look how we expect, we can just go to Document, Color Format, and RGB 8-bit. Okay, so we've just gone from 32-bit float to 8-bit integer, and as we can see, everything fits within that 8-bit depth quite nicely. And as before, we can just go ahead and export to JPEG or TIFF or whichever format we want. So I hope that's proven useful for you. This approach is really good if you're into, say, games development and you want to produce some beauty shots of your work to share. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the other video tutorials.